Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, thank you guys for taking the time to join me for my webinar today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rose. I'm part of the field sales engineering team here at MECCO. So typically I'm out in the field going on site for product demonstrations, site assessments, application support, or just general training. Lately, a lot of my work has been remote with everything going on. So we've been doing a lot of virtual demos and webinars like these. Right, so today we'll talk about laser marking and how to make sure that you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. We will use the next 20 minutes or so to talk about some of the considerations to look at whenever you are evaluating a marking technology. We'll go through some of the benefits of laser marking and why it might be a good fit for you. And then we'll go through a cost breakdown of our newest laser, the Lightrider. That way you can see just how cost effective the system could be. A little bit of housekeeping. In your control panel, there should be a section for questions. So we use the last 5-10 minutes of the webinar to go through questions. So as we're going along, any questions that you have, feel free to enter those into the box and then we'll get to those at the end. All right, so part of my job involves asking questions to help qualify and make sure that laser marking really is a good fit for the application. So we'll talk through some of the different considerations and questions that are worth asking as you're evaluating your technology. So the first itself is the technology. You know, there are a lot of different lasers on the market, different wavelengths, and each type tends to have a unique reaction with different materials. So one thing I always recommend whenever you're evaluating a marking technology is to have samples processed. That will help you to pick the right technology, make sure you're getting the mark that you need, but it will also help you to get an idea of what the cycle times will look like. And more importantly, if you do any post-processing, you can make sure that the marks that you will get will withstand any post-processing operations. Another question I like to ask is, you know, looking into the future, are there additional parts that you would like to run through the system at a later date? So you might be looking for a system to mark on a plastic material right now. So, you know, like a green or a UV laser might get you a really nice mark, but if you plan on running metal through the system later, you can get a mark with a green and a UV, but in that situation, you might want to consider a fiber laser because you can mark both metals and plastics. So you want to check out some different options and make sure that you are choosing the best technology to accommodate what you're doing now, but then also things you may run through in the future. And so that's for the mark itself, but there's also the way that it's integrated. One thing we hear a lot is people want to use a system as a manual load and unload system up front, but then incorporate automation at a later date. That might look like a robot to load your parts. So if you know that you have modifications you would like to make in the future, if you can take that into consideration and spec it in on the front end, that will help to, you know, upgrade or improve the system at a later time. So right now, if you're using a manual system, but you want to use a robot later, if you get an enclosure with a manual door, you would have to upgrade that later. But if you spec it in on the front end and say put a pneumatic door, or if you use a rotary workstation so the front is open, that will help to save time and cost later down the road. Okay, next we'll look at quality and longevity of the mark itself. So one thing that you want to check on is you want to make sure that you are getting a good quality mark. And you know, one thing to ask, a good question is doing nothing an option? So whether you're looking at adding part marking to your process, or if you're looking to improve on your current marking operation, take a look at what your process looks right now and consider any impacts that that's having later in your other processes. For example, if you're not marking at all, or if you're currently getting a mark that isn't always legible, does that cause part mixes? If you have a part mix, is that causing scrap and rework? And in turn, is that getting out to the customer and causing customer disappointments. So these are some things that you can think about, and you can roll that into cost justification if you are seeing negative impacts of your current process. Okay, and then you want to look at durability of the mark. So what happens if your mark falls off or if it wears away? Losing your traceability, that could open the door for additional costs, maybe negative impacts. For example, we had a customer who was making fall protection equipment, and I believe they were using a vinyl label to mark the parts. But what was happening is those parts were going out into the field, and the label was actually wearing off before the end of the life of the equipment. So since you could no longer track that equipment, you no longer have your serial number, you aren't able to calibrate it, and then that equipment ends up getting scrapped out before it's actually done with the lifetime of the equipment. So something to consider, the impacts of what happens if your mark does tend to wear out. Another section, another topic to think about is support and training. What support are you getting with the system? With lasers, a lot of times it's, how much the person behind the computer knows, who's programming it. So do you have to figure everything out by yourself, or do you have resources available with the company that you partner with to help you get caught up to speed? That can be the difference between getting up and running in a couple days versus getting up and running in a couple of weeks. So another thing is, after you're trained on the system, what happens if that equipment fails? What does support look like as far as fixing the system? Are parts available? Are people available to help correct the issues? These are all things to consider, because that can obviously lead to downtime, which in the end, that all ends up costing money. Okay, next we'll look at the overall cost of the system. With capital equipment, it's very easy to look at the price tag, the upfront cost of it, but it's good to look at everything else that goes into the system over the lifetime of it. We talked about the quality and longevity of the mark. What happens if that mark wears off? Some alternatives we see to laser marking that are pretty common are labels, inkjet, outsourcing. You have chem etch. There's plenty of different things on the market, and each technology has its own operational costs. So, again, quality and longevity, what happens if that mark wears off? Then you can look at your setup and your operational time. How much time does it take to get up and running at the beginning of your day to set up your system, start getting your parts through? And what does the operational time look like? Are you meeting your throughput requirements, or do you need to speed that up? Okay, then you have your consumable costs. Labels and ink, you're gonna have to buy consumables for the life of that equipment to keep it up and running. And then you can also think about how much time do you have to take to maintain that equipment, keep it clean, keep it running. All of that adds up into waste costs. Next, you have inventory. What components do you have to keep on the shelf to keep that equipment up and running? And then parts as well. So tags are really big on this. Typically with tags, people will order pre-marked tags and then fill in sections of it. So what happens in that case if you have a revision change? Do you have to scrap out all of those tags? Maybe it makes more sense to get blank tags and get a marking technology so that you can mark the entire tag to help prevent, inventory costs and having to scrap out tags that you can no longer use because they're no longer valid. Then you can look at supply issues. So if you, for example, if you're outsourcing your marking, is that giving you a longer lead time? Does your competitors have a leg up on you because they can offer something in 2 weeks that takes you 4 weeks because you have to wait, you have to send your parts out, get them back? What kind of impact does that have? As well as running out of consumables. So, you know, especially right now, a lot of things have longer lead times. Is that going to cause issues for you? Is that going to prevent shipments? And if shipments aren't going out the door, then revenue, that's holding up your revenue coming in. So you can take all of these considerations and really roll that in to figure out your long-term ROI for the overall cost of the equipment that you're looking at. All right, so I mean, is laser marking right for you? It may or may not be. It all depends on your application, your process, and what's important to you. So, you know, these are just some of the considerations to look at, and you can use that to evaluate, do I keep my current marking process, or does it make sense to upgrade and bring in a laser marking system? Right, so we'll talk about some of the benefits, some of the things that you'll gain with laser marking. You know, everyone still has improvements that they have to make, goals that they have to hit. You know, cost savings are always at the top of the list. So with laser marking, you could potentially help solve some of these problems. You know, they're versatile. As I said, there are a handful of different types of lasers. So you can cover a very wide range of materials that you can mark with lasers. And a lot of times you may have lasers that can do multiple product lines. So you have the flexibility there to mark on different types of materials. And then we talked earlier, you know, it's more than just the mark itself, it's also the way that it's integrated. And with laser marking, you can integrate these many different ways. You can have standalone systems, or you can build these into automated cells. You can have semi-automated systems to help with throughput. There's a lot of different options available as far as part handling. Okay. Then you're going to get a permanent mark. We talked about considering what happens if that mark wears away. With lasers, you're marking directly onto the part, so that mark is not going to scratch off, it's not going to wear away. And if it's a matter of getting more depth, a lot of times that's a simple adjustment in the settings on a laser, so you can make a deeper mark, again, if you have post-processing, to make sure that it withstands any post-operations or harsh environments. Okay, they're economical. We talked about consumables. As far as consumables go, with a laser, they're minimal. The biggest thing with lasers really is just making sure that you keep them clean. You might have a little bit of money in air filters for a fume extraction system. But I mean, other than that, and electricity, other than that, consumables, there really are none. And they're easy to use. You can make adjustments on the fly. You can connect these to databases to pull information. And I mean, you can get these in-house, set them up, and get started marking in just a matter of hours. And last, they're safe. You don't have to worry so much about, I mean, you still have to consider ergonomics, but it's an alternative to things like Hilti guns that may come with more aggressive impacts. Laser marking, it is a non-contact mark. So basically you'll take your part, put it into an enclosure, close the door, mark the part, and you get a mark and you're safe. Okay, next we'll talk about the Lightrider. So this is the newest laser marking system that we are offering, and it really was designed to be an economical system. So we designed this with cost in mind to help, you know, people get a system in-house and get up and running at a lower upfront cost. It's a pretty nice system. I actually have one right behind me, so we'll go ahead and hop into that. I'll show you the laser marking system. So I'm going to just unshare my screen real quick while we do this. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. Hopefully my webcam is nice and big for you. We'll go ahead and walk over to the Lightrider. Bear with me while I put this on the tripod. Okay, but what you're getting is it's a 20-watt fiber laser inside of a class 1 enclosure. And since it's a fiber laser, you can mark pretty much any metals with this as well as plastics. So you can see it does have a manual door. So it's hinged, it opens up to the top. And inside of the enclosure, you have a breadboard with 1/4 tapped holes in it, so you can put your fixturing in there. And then you have a programmable Z-axis. So your rail is mounted to that programmable Z-axis, so you can raise and lower it to accommodate for different part heights. And again, setup is very simple. You know, once you have your job files created, you'll load your fixture into the enclosure, start loading your parts. In the software, you'll open your job file, and then at that point, you're ready to start running. So we have a part in there. I have just a quick job file set up. We'll see if we can't get this to mark so you guys can see it. All right, and on the front of the enclosure, there's a go button. So you just press the go button, and then your laser will start marking. All right, hopefully that came through okay. But you see, this was just a piece of anodized aluminum, and I did the Lightrider logo. So pretty quick system, gets you a nice mark, gives you a lot of flexibility as far as materials that you can mark on it. Just to show you a few others. For example, if you have a tool room, this would be great for that. Here's just the little tool that we marked. Okay. And then just a little fitting here with a barcode on it. And so you can see something plastic. Not exactly sure what it is, but white plastic. You can see we got a nice gray mark on that. All right, so that was just very brief run through of the system. If you're interested in getting a demo that's a little bit more in depth on that, just let us know and we will be happy to set that up and walk you through it. Okay, bear with me 1 second. We'll get back to the presentation. Okay. And so these are just some of the photos. I'm sure you recognize that fitting I just showed you and just a couple of other marks. Okay, so we'll go ahead, we'll walk through just a cost breakdown of the Lightrider. Now, obviously, we have made a few assumptions here. This is going to be different for everybody depending on your application and your volumes, but we made the assumption looking at a 3-year payback with the Lightrider, cost per mark. All right, so your upfront cost, you're at $20,000. Divide that up by your 3 years, that puts you at $6,700 per year. And then cost per week, assuming that you're running over 52 weeks, puts you at $128. Break that down, assuming 1 8-hour shift, $3.20 per hour. And then if you're getting 1 mark per minute, which is very doable, divide 320 by 60, puts you at 5 cents. So what happens when you factor in electricity? Okay. You've got about 1,650 watts of electricity that you're consuming. And we did this just based on some local costs. So that puts you at about 2 cents per hour to run the system. That gives you 0.0003 cents. So your total cost per mark, it's about a nickel. Not too bad. All right, so that was some food for thought. Again, whenever you're looking at a marking technology, check out different technologies, get samples, make sure that you are getting the mark that you expect, getting the mark that you need. Verify the quality. Make sure that the mark you get is going to withstand any post-processing, any harsh environments, and just make sure that it's readable. One thing to note, with plastics, one thing I always do is I'll scratch the mark to make sure that it did penetrate deep enough to withstand any scratching or anything like that. Okay, and then again, it's easy to look at that upfront cost, but there are other factors that go into the total cost of ownership. So if you're working on a cost justification, try and keep those things in mind, and it might help to build your case. All right, so before we hop into into questions, a couple reminders. We do still have another webinar today at 2 p.m. That's going to be on our .peen line. So if you're interested in that, if you're not registered already, you can register for that, the same place that you registered for this webinar. And if you have a specific application, if you want to talk one-on-one with either me or one of my colleagues, you can still book one-on-ones, and we can talk about applications or do personal demos. All right, I have my direct contact information on this slide, so feel free to reach out to me, or I am just one person on the team. I have some other coworkers who can help as well, so you are always welcome to call the main line at MECCO. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and hop into questions. All right, I got one question. Do we have a portable laser? Unfortunately, with laser marking systems, because of the safety protocols, a portable system, we don't have one. They're kind of hard to come across for marking applications. But if you do need a portable marker, we have portable .peen systems available. Okay, what applications is the Lightrider good for? So the Lightrider, I mean, it's a pretty good general purpose laser. Like I said, you can mark pretty much any metals and plastics. So you can cover a wide range of materials that we see, in the manufacturing industry. But these are good for like tool rooms or maker spaces. The the only thing I would say it's not good for is fully automated systems, just because your limiting factor with the Lightrider is going to be the time it takes to open the door, load parts, and unload the parts. So the marks themselves are typically pretty quick, but again, if you're looking for, everyone has their own version of what's high and low throughput, but if you have the time available to manually load and unload this system, as long as your part size, your range of sizes will fit inside that enclosure, it's a pretty nice system. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see here. What size marking fields are available? Okay, so with the Lightrider, we have two lens sizes available. We have a 160 millimeter lens and a 254 millimeter lens. The 160 millimeter lens gives you a 4.3 inch square marking window, and the 254 millimeter lens gives you a 6.9 inch square marking window. And that marking window is going to be centered to that breadboard, so that's one thing to keep in mind. And the lens size does affect the part heights, so whenever we're working with you, we'll want to understand, the overall part sizes that you would run through the system, so we can make sure we spec in the correct lens. Okay. Now just give it one more minute for any last minute questions. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up here. Again, like I said, if you guys have any questions, if you want to book a one-on-one, or if you want your own personal demo, just feel free to reach out to us. Again, you have my direct contact information, but you are always welcome to call the main line at MECCO. All right, I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you found this useful. All right, bye guys.